He got down on one knee in the middle of our favorite park. The golden light of sunset draped everything in a soft glow. Birds were singing, and the summer breeze played with the hem of my dress. A small crowd had formed, strangers holding their phones up, smiles forming on their faces, as if we were the final scene in a rom-com. My heart should have been racing with excitement. I should have been crying happy tears. I should have been thinking, this is it, the moment I've dreamed of my whole life. But instead, I felt cold, not physically. It was a warm evening, but inside me, something had turned to ice. I looked at him, down on one knee, holding that little velvet box. His voice trembled, just a little, as he said my name and asked me to be his wife. The words were perfect. The moment was picture perfect, but his eyes weren't. They weren't full of love or nervous joy. They were tired, distant, like someone reciting a script, not speaking from the heart. And suddenly, I had this terrifying thought. He's not doing this because he loves me. He's doing this because he thinks he should. I forced a smile. I heard myself say yes. And as the crowd clapped and someone cheered behind us, I felt like I was watching myself from above, like I was acting in a scene that wasn't mine. I had dreamed of being proposed to since I was a little girl, but I never imagined that when it finally happened, I'd feel like I was being buried alive under the weight of a lie. You might be wondering how I got there, how I ended up saying yes to a man who I knew, deep down, didn't truly love me. This is that story, a story about how we met, how I ignored the signs, how I convinced myself that close enough was good enough, and how I finally found the strength to walk away from a love that was never real, even when the whole world was watching. It started the way 1,000 love stories do, quietly, without fanfare. I met Ethan at a bookstore. Yes, seriously, a real bookstore. Not a dating app or some chaotic party. Just a quiet, independently owned bookstore with creaky wooden floors, the scent of paper and dust, and soft jazz playing through tinny ceiling speakers. I was sitting on the floor in the poetry section, flipping through a collection by Mary Oliver, when a paperback fell from the shelf above me and landed on my shoulder. I looked up, startled, and there he was. Tall, disheveled hair, worn denim jacket, kind eyes. He apologized quickly and bent down to pick up the book. It was The Great Gatsby. He chuckled and said, Scott Fitzgerald making an entrance. Classic. I laughed. Not because it was funny, really, but because there was something disarming about him. His energy didn't feel like someone hitting on me. It felt warm, familiar, like a person you might have known in another life. We ended up talking right there for over an hour, sitting cross-legged on the bookstore floor. He told me he came in every Sunday, said he liked to browse, even if he never bought anything, said it calmed him, the quiet, the order, the way people seemed to respect each other's space. We talked about books, then about movies, then about life. He asked for my number at the end of it, but in a way that didn't feel forced or overly confident. He just said, "I'd like to keep talking to you. Over coffee. Maybe. Only if you want." And I did want. That was how it began. Our first date was at a little coffee shop, tucked between a plant store and a secondhand vinyl shop. He brought me flowers, not a big bouquet, just a few daffodils wrapped in brown paper. He said, "They reminded me of that poem you liked, the one about spring and beginnings." I was impressed that he remembered. Most men I had dated couldn't recall what I ordered 5 minutes ago, let alone what I'd casually mentioned during a bookstore chat. We sat by the window. It rained a little. He told me stories about growing up in a small town where everyone knew everything about everyone. He said he'd moved to the city to escape it, to be anonymous for a while. There was a sadness in him, but it was quiet, hidden between jokes and observations and clever one-liners. I didn't mind. In fact, I was drawn to it. I had always been someone who wanted to fix people, the broken ones, the quiet ones, the ones who seemed unreachable, and Ethan felt like that. Unreachable, but not impossible. Over the weeks that followed, we became inseparable. He wasn't overly affectionate, but he was consistent. Every morning, I woke up to a text. Every weekend, we had plans. He'd cook for me, nothing fancy, just pasta and vegetables and wine, and we'd sit on the floor of his tiny apartment, watching old movies. He never said the words, "I love you." Not at first, not even after 2 months, but he showed it in small ways. He remembered how I took my coffee. He picked up my favorite chocolate when he went to the store. He once drove across the city at 2 a.m. because I called him crying after a nightmare. He was there. That was what mattered, right? I remember telling my best friend, "He's not the most expressive, but I think he really cares. I think he just loves differently." She raised an eyebrow. "Or maybe he just doesn't love you yet." But I didn't want to believe that. I'd been in loud, messy relationships before, the kind that burn hot and leave ashes. Ethan felt safe, and after so much chaos, I wanted safe. Still, there were moments, little things that felt off, things I chose not to examine too closely, like the way he never talked about the future unless I brought it up, or how he'd change the subject when I said "I love you," or how he'd disappear into himself for days, still present, still texting, but emotionally vacant. I once asked him if he saw us getting married someday. He smiled and kissed my forehead. "One day, maybe. Let's just enjoy what we have." It sounded sweet, non-committal, but sweet, and I convinced myself that patience was romantic, that love didn't always come wrapped in fireworks. Sometimes it came like slow burning embers, that if I just loved him enough, he'd love me back the same way, fully, freely, deeply. One night, 6 months into our relationship, I met his mother. It was unexpected. He hadn't told me she was visiting. I walked into his apartment, and there she was, sitting stiffly on the couch, clutching a mug of tea, like it was the last warm thing in the world. She looked me up and down, polite smile. I extended my hand. She shook it loosely. We sat in awkward silence while Ethan made tea in the kitchen. She finally said, "He doesn't bring girls home. You know, never has." I smiled nervously. "I'm honored then." She didn't smile back. "He doesn't trust easily. He's been hurt." It felt like a warning, or maybe a test. Either way, I failed, because later that night, as I lay next to Ethan, I asked, "What did she mean?" And he just said, "She likes to make people uncomfortable. Don't worry about it." But I did worry, because he didn't deny it, and he didn't explain. He just closed himself off again, the same way he always did when something got too real. Looking back, I think I knew even then. I think a part of me knew this was a man who liked the idea of love more than the reality, who wanted someone next to him, but wasn't ready to be seen all the way through, who needed companionship more than he needed connection. But I kept choosing him, because when he laughed, it felt like sunlight. Because when he held my hand, I felt like I wasn't alone. Because I didn't want to start over. Because I thought love was about choosing each other, even when it was hard. I didn't know then that real love doesn't feel like convincing someone to stay. It feels like freedom. That was the beginning. Not a fairy tale, not a fireworks kind of love, but a soft, slow build, like watching paint dry and telling yourself it's art. I told myself he was just guarded, that I could earn his trust, that love would grow, but love can't grow where there's no space for it. And he never made space. He just filled the air with gestures, with silence, with almosts, and I clung to them like they were promises. They say hindsight is 20/20. That's such a cruel thing, isn't it? Because it means all the warning signs I ignored were always there, flashing in red, screaming for my attention, and I simply chose not to see them. Or maybe I saw them, and I looked away. Because when you love someone, or think you do, you don't want to believe that the cracks you see are signs of collapse. You want to believe they're just growing pains. That love, like people, takes time to mature. But some cracks aren't meant to heal. They're fault lines. And one day, they break everything apart. The first red flag came early, maybe 3 weeks after we started dating. We were supposed to meet for dinner. A small Italian place I had mentioned once, offhand, and he remembered. I got ready, excited in that quiet, hopeful way you get when something feels new and full of potential. I waited at the restaurant for over an hour. He didn't show, didn't text, didn't call. I left after an hour and 20 minutes. Tried not to cry in the Uber home. Felt stupid. Felt small. 3 hours later, he texted, "Sorry, I crashed early. Rough day. Rain check." That was it. No explanation. No apology that sounded like it came from someone who genuinely felt bad. But I let it go. I told myself, maybe he's dealing with something. Maybe he just forgot. He's human. Red flag. I folded it into a handkerchief and tucked it into my pocket. Then there was the way he never introduced me to his friends. I introduced him to mine. He came to my roommate's birthday party, smiled, stayed an hour, left early. I asked once, "When do I get to meet your people?" He shrugged. "They're not really around much these days. People drift." Later, I found out he still played poker every other Friday with his childhood buddies. But I was never invited. I convinced myself it wasn't personal. Maybe he just needed space. Maybe he didn't want to mix worlds too soon. Red flag. Folded. Tucked away. He never told me about his past. That sounds normal. Maybe some people are private, but I mean never. I asked about his exes. Not in a jealous way, just curious. He changed the subject, or gave one-sentence answers. Once, I asked, "Have you ever been in love?" He was quiet for a long time, then said, "I thought I was, but I guess not. Doesn't matter now." Something about the way he said it chilled me. Like it did matter. Like it haunted him. But he had locked that room in his heart and thrown away the key. Red flag. Folded. Hidden. He never got angry, which sounds like a good thing, until you realize silence is just another kind of weapon. Whenever we disagreed, he'd go quiet. Not for an hour, not for a night, but for days. Not full-blown ignoring. No, he was too clever for that. He'd reply to texts, answer questions, but coldly, without warmth. I remember the first time it happened, I had made a comment about how I didn't like when he bailed last minute. I said I felt like a second thought sometimes. He didn't argue, just said, "Okay." Then, he withdrew for 3 days. I felt like I was dating a robot. Short answers. No affection. No initiative to see me. I apologized. Even though I hadn't done anything wrong, he came back, smiling. Said, "I just needed time to think." And I told myself, that's mature, right? Taking space instead of fighting. Red flag. Folded. Smoothed out. He never asked questions. Never about my past, my childhood, my dreams. We'd talk. Sure, we had great conversations about movies, books, politics, random news stories, but never about me. Not deeply, not intimately. I once told him something vulnerable about my fear of abandonment, something from childhood. He nodded and said, "That sucks. Childhood's rough." And then he changed the subject. Red flag. Not dramatic, not screaming, just quiet apathy, just emotional distance dressed in chill energy. I told myself he wasn't good with emotions, that he was doing his best, but love doesn't ignore the heart of the person in front of you. Then there was the ring, not the engagement ring. Another ring, a silver band he always wore on his right hand. I asked him about it one night. He paused, said, "It's from someone I used to know." I asked, "Someone you loved?" He didn't answer, just turned away. Later, I found out it was from an ex, a serious one he had never told me about. I should have asked more questions, but part of me didn't want the answers. Red flag, folded, ironed. I kept telling myself, every relationship has flaws. Nobody's perfect. He shows he cares in his own way. But here's what I've learned. When you have to explain someone's love over and over, not to others, but to yourself, it's not love. It's a performance, a justification, a coping mechanism. One night, I had a dream. We were walking down a hallway with hundreds of closed doors. I kept asking him to open one. He wouldn't. He just kept walking, holding my hand, smiling, and I followed. I woke up crying, and I still told myself it meant we were figuring things out, that we were on a journey. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was in love with someone who had never let me in, and I kept calling that intimacy. Looking back, I don't think Ethan ever meant to hurt me. That's the hardest part. Because it would be easier if he were cruel, manipulative, obvious, but he wasn't. He was gentle, quiet, thoughtful in small ways. He just wasn't there. Not fully, not emotionally, not spiritually. And I kept showing up with my whole heart, hoping one day he'd match me. He never did. They say love is blind, but I don't think that's true. Love sees everything. It just chooses to believe the best anyway, until it can't anymore, until one day you're sitting in your car after another silent fight, staring at your own reflection in the rearview mirror, and whispering, "This isn't love. This is longing." It happened on a Sunday evening, the kind of golden hour summer evening where everything feels just a little too perfect. Warm light spilling through the trees, a breeze that smells like jasmine in late July, the kind of day where you almost believe the universe is rooting for you. He asked me to go for a walk. We hadn't done that in a while. He said he wanted to just spend time, no phones. I thought maybe it was his way of making up for how distant he'd been all week, so I said yes. We walked to the park near his apartment. Our park, in a way. The same one we'd visited on one of our very first dates. We sat under the same willow tree where he once read a poem to me from his phone, back when he still made those little gestures that made me believe we had something rare. I thought we were just reminiscing, but then he slowed his steps, let out a nervous laugh, and dropped to one knee. Everything around me went silent. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in a dizzying, disorienting way, like the world tilted slightly off its axis. There he was, kneeling on the path, holding a small velvet box in both hands. His fingers trembled just a little, not enough that the average stranger would notice. But I did. I noticed everything. He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold ring. No diamond, just a flat band, clean and unassuming. "I know this isn't fancy," he began, "but it's real, just like us." I stood frozen. People were starting to slow down around us. A few couples smiled. A kid pointed and whispered something to his mom. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. He looked up at me. "I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" This was it. The moment. The one every rom-com builds toward. The one every girl dreams about. Even the ones who say they don't. And yet, all I felt was dread. It hit me so hard. I nearly staggered backward, because nothing about this felt right. Nothing about his face said joy. Nothing about his voice said forever. He looked tired, like someone checking off a box on a list they didn't make themselves. And in that instant, I knew. I knew he was proposing not because he wanted to spend his life with me, but because he didn't want to lose me. Or maybe worse, because he didn't want to start over. Because being with me felt easier than being alone. My heart started pounding in my ears. I felt hot and cold at the same time. I thought about all the red flags, all the distance, all the unanswered questions. I thought about how he'd never really let me in, how I knew so little about his past, how he'd never once said, "I see you, all of you, and I love you anyway." I thought about how I had given him everything, my time, my trust, my vulnerability, and how he had only ever given me fragments. But I also thought about how much I had wanted this, how long I had waited, how hard I had worked to make us work. And in front of all those strangers, I said yes. The moment I said it, he smiled, relieved, not joyful. He stood up, slid the ring onto my finger. Someone clapped. Someone took a photo, and I smiled too, because I had to. Because it's what you do when someone proposes and the world is watching. But inside, something was breaking. It wasn't dramatic, not a shattering, more like a hairline fracture, deep and quiet, the kind that doesn't hurt right away, but spreads over time until the whole foundation crumbles. That night, we had dinner with his mom. He hadn't told me she'd be there. Apparently, she knew about the proposal in advance. She hugged me tightly, said, "Finally, I've been waiting for him to settle down." I forced a smile, tried not to feel like I had just become someone's idea of stability. At one point during dinner, she said something that still echoes in my mind. "You're good for him. He needs someone who keeps him grounded, someone solid, not someone he's madly in love with, not someone he chooses every day, just someone solid." It felt less like a celebration and more like a business merger. Later that night, we lay in bed. He was asleep within minutes, snoring softly, arm draped across my waist. I stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours. I kept hearing his voice from earlier. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you." But there was something missing from that sentence. Something I needed so desperately to hear. Not just "I want to marry you," but "I can't imagine this life without you." That part never came, and it hit me. Then, in the deepest part of me, he didn't propose because he couldn't live without me. He proposed because he didn't want to be alone. It was a different kind of heartbreak. Not the kind where someone cheats, not the kind where someone leaves, but the kind where someone stays, without ever really arriving. The days that followed were full of congratulations, texts, calls, Instagram comments. Everyone was so happy for us. Everyone except me. I smiled. I posted the photo. I went dress shopping with my mom. And all the while, this quiet, aching truth pressed heavier and heavier on my chest. I am not chosen. I am convenient. One night, I asked him a simple question. "Why now?" He looked at me, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, why did you propose now?" We hadn't talked about marriage seriously. We've had a weird few months. Why now? He paused, then said, I don't know. It just felt like the right time. Everyone around me is getting married. I figured we're in a good place. A good place. That was what he called this. Whatever this was. And I realized he hadn't proposed to me. He had proposed at me because it was time. Because it was next. Because I was there. And still, I didn't leave. Because part of me thought, maybe he'll open up now. Maybe this is the step that makes him feel safe enough to love fully. Maybe now he'll choose me back. But if someone doesn't choose you when it's hard, they won't truly choose you when it's easy. I wish I could say the story ended with the proposal, but the truth is, that was just the beginning of the end. At first, I didn't want to ask. I didn't want to know, because some questions, once asked, unravel everything. But the silence between us was growing louder. The excitement people expected me to feel after a proposal, it never came. There were no butterflies, no late-night Pinterest boards, no dreamy, what kind of wedding do you want talks. There was just fog, a heaviness I carried with me everywhere. And deep in my gut, a whisper I could no longer ignore. This ring, it's not about you. It started with the way he avoided any conversation about the future. I brought up wedding venues, casually, just to gauge his interest. He shrugged. I mean, we've got time. I asked about a rough timeline. He said, whenever works. I'm not really picky. At first, I thought maybe he just wasn't into the planning. Some guys aren't. But the more I pushed, the more he pulled away. One night, I asked directly, are you excited? He looked at me like I had asked if he wanted a root canal. Yeah, sure. It's just, I'm not great with this kind of stuff. You know that. I nodded. But I didn't feel reassured, because that wasn't nerves. That wasn't discomfort with logistics. That was something deeper, something colder. A few days later, I found the envelope. It was in his desk drawer, the one he always kept locked, which had always felt strange to me. But I'd never pressed. It was a plain white envelope, thick with folded letters. I wasn't snooping. I had been looking for a stapler. At least, that's what I told myself. Inside were 6 letters, all from the same person. Her name was Lily. She wrote in loopy, rushed handwriting. The kind of writing you only do when you know the person you're writing to will understand your chaos. They weren't love letters. Not exactly. But they were intimate. Too intimate for me to feel okay reading them. But I read them anyway. She talked about missing him, about how she wasn't ready, about how they always find their way back. She mentioned a ring. The one I gave you. Do you still wear it? That's when it hit me. The silver ring. The one he wore every day on his right hand. It was hers. I put the letters back. I didn't confront him that night. Instead, I lay in bed next to him, staring at the ceiling. My mind unraveling. Was Lily the one who broke him? Was he still in love with her? Was I the rebound he mistook for healing? I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him and ask, why did you propose to me when your heart still belongs to someone else. But I didn't, because I was afraid of the answer. 2 nights later, I finally asked. We were eating dinner. Thai takeout, sitting on the couch, TV humming in the background. I turned it off. He looked up, surprised. "Can I ask you something?" I said, my voice calm but shaking underneath. He nodded. "Who's Lily?" His face changed instantly. Not with anger, not with guilt, with something far worse. Resignation. He didn't ask how I knew. He just leaned back and exhaled, long and slow. "We were together for 5 years," he said quietly. "Off and on, mostly off toward the end. She didn't want the same things I did." I waited. He didn't elaborate, so I pushed. "And the letters, the ring." He rubbed his face, like he was trying to wipe the whole conversation off of it. "She gave me that ring when we moved in together. Said it was her way of promising me she was trying. She left 6 months later." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Do you still love her?" A long pause. A silence that told me everything before he even spoke. "I don't know," he said finally. "I don't think so. I don't think about her like that anymore." But he wore the ring. He kept the letters, and he proposed to me while still carrying her ghost. I didn't cry that night. I didn't yell. I just sat there, numb, wondering if I was just a placeholder, a warm body in a bed that used to be hers. He apologized, half-heartedly. Said he didn't want to ruin what we had by talking about the past. Said he meant the proposal. Said he loved me, but his love had holes in it. You could drive a truck through those holes and still have room for all the things he never said. In the days that followed, I kept asking myself, why did he propose? Was it guilt? Was it fear? Was it pressure from his mom? And then I remembered something. A few weeks before the proposal, we had run into one of his old friends at a cafe. The guy congratulated him, not on an engagement, but on finally settling down. Everyone's getting married. Man, the friend had joked. Figured you'd be last? Ethan laughed. Shrugged. I thought nothing of it at the time, but now it clicked. He wasn't proposing because of me. He was proposing because he was tired of being the one without a plan, because his friends were getting married, because his mom was hinting, because I had stayed, because I was safe, steady, predictable, because I didn't leave. I wish I could say I packed my bags that night, that I walked out fierce and empowered, but I didn't. I stayed because I still loved him, because I still believed that maybe love could grow if we just watered it enough. But love doesn't grow in soil poisoned by lies, and no matter how hard you try, you can't plant a future in someone else's past. One night, I looked at the ring on my finger, the one he gave me. It was beautiful in a simple way, but it felt heavier than it should. I took it off, set it on the nightstand. He didn't notice, not for days. When he finally did, he asked, "You okay?" I said, "I don't know." He nodded, said nothing else. And that silence was the answer. They say when you truly hit rock bottom, there's only one direction left to go, up. But they never talk about how long you sit there, staring at the rubble, wondering if maybe it's safer just to stay buried for weeks, I floated, not living, not really present, just existing, waking up next to someone who felt increasingly like a stranger, going through the motions, pretending that this engagement meant something it didn't. I smiled for photos, nodded along when people asked about wedding plans, lied to my friends when they asked. "How's everything going?" "Great," I'd say, even though I hadn't felt great in a long time. One night, I came home to find him passed out on the couch, half-eaten pizza on the coffee table. TV still playing some old movie. He looked peaceful, comfortable, and I realized he was fine. He wasn't tormented. He wasn't aching, that hollow, aching silence between us. Only I could hear it. I sat on the edge of the couch, watching him sleep, and I thought, if I left right now, would he fight for me? Would he even notice? And for the first time, I let the truth come out, even just in my own mind. No, he wouldn't. Not really, because he never really chose me. He just accepted me. That night, I made a list. It sounds silly, I know, but I needed to see it. All the things I had lost while trying to hold on to someone who barely held on to me. I wrote down my confidence, my voice, my joy, my ability to trust, my sense of home, and most of all, myself. The next morning, I woke up early, took a walk by myself. No phone, no music, just me and the quiet. It was the first time in months I felt real, like I was finally inhabiting my own body again. I remembered who I was before him, before the silence, before the second guessing, before I started shrinking myself to fit into someone else's idea of enough. That afternoon, I made a decision. I would leave, not in anger, not with dramatic shouting or accusations, but with clarity, with peace, because I finally understood. Staying in a place where you're not loved deeply isn't strength. It's self-abandonment. I packed a small bag, just a weekend bag. I didn't know where I was going yet. I just knew I had to go. When he came home, I was sitting at the table. The engagement ring lay in front of me. He looked at it, then at me, and for once, he didn't pretend not to know. "You're leaving?" he asked. I nodded. "Is there someone else?" That made me laugh. Not out of amusement, but out of disbelief. "Yes," I said quietly. "Me. I'm choosing me." He didn't fight. He didn't cry. He didn't say, "Don't go." And that told me everything. I moved in with a friend for a while. Slept on her couch, ate too many takeout meals, cried in the shower when I needed to. But every day, I felt a little stronger. I started journaling again. I took myself on solo coffee dates. I bought flowers, not for an apartment, not for a man, just for me. And slowly, I began to come back to life. Some nights were harder than others. I'd see couples on the street and feel that tug in my chest, that ache for what I thought I had. But I reminded myself, you didn't lose real love. You lost a version of love that asked you to disappear to keep it alive. And I deserved better than that. One day, weeks later, he texted me just one line. "Do you ever think we gave up too soon?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed. We didn't give up. We woke up. And only one of us listened to the alarm. I didn't hear from him again. It's been a year now. I don't wear a ring. I don't have a plan. I don't know when I'll fall in love again. But I know this. I will never again beg to be chosen. I will never again stay where I'm tolerated instead of celebrated. I will never again dim my light to make someone else feel less lost, because I have found the one person I can never afford to lose, me. It had been 6 months, 6 whole months since I left. By then, I had moved into a small studio apartment on the quiet side of town. It was nothing fancy, just one large room, a tiny kitchen, and a window that overlooked the street below. But it was mine. Every plant, every throw pillow, every chipped coffee mug on the shelf. I chose them. No compromises, no second guessing if it was our style. Just mine. It was the first time in years I felt at home. I was in the middle of watering my plants, a quiet Sunday ritual, when the knock came. 3 short knocks, firm, familiar. I froze. Some part of me already knew. I opened the door, and there he was, Ethan, standing in the hallway, like a ghost that had found its way back to the living. He looked tired, thinner than I remembered, eyes a little hollow, like he hadn't been sleeping well. He gave a weak smile. "Hey." I didn't speak, not right away, because just seeing him again knocked the air out of me, not because I still loved him, but because once I would have done anything for this moment. And now, I wasn't sure I wanted it. He held out a coffee, my favorite order from the cafe down the street, oat milk latte with cinnamon on top. I took it. Not because I wanted it, but because I was curious. He gestured awkwardly. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. He walked in slowly, like he was entering a sacred space. Maybe he was. We sat on the floor. I didn't offer him the couch. He looked around. "You did all this yourself?" I nodded. "It's beautiful," he said. I didn't reply, because I wasn't here to make him comfortable. He got quiet. Then, after a moment, I messed up. I said nothing. I didn't realize what I had until you left. I don't know what I thought. That you'd always be there. That we'd figure it out eventually. Still, I said nothing. Because I had waited months to hear those words. And now that I had, they felt empty. I went back to therapy, he added. Good. He looked surprised I had answered. I have been thinking a lot about us. And about me. He paused. I still love you. My chest didn't tighten. My heart didn't race. There was no cinematic swell of music, no slow motion moment of realization, just stillness. I looked at him for a long time. Then I said, "Do you love me? Or do you miss the version of you that existed when I loved you?" He blinked. That shook him, I continued, because I loved you with everything I had. I gave you grace, patience, softness. I dimmed my needs so yours could shine. And you didn't choose me. He opened his mouth, but I stopped him with a look. You proposed not because you loved me, but because you were scared to lose the last steady thing in your life. And I stayed because I thought love meant endurance. I stood up, walked over to the window. But love isn't supposed to feel like drowning in someone else's silence, he stood, too. "I've changed, so have I said. He nodded slowly. "Is there someone else?" I shook my head. "No, just me." And for the first time, I meant it with my whole heart. He looked down. I guess I was too late. I walked over, took his hand gently. "You weren't too late. You were exactly on time to show me how much I've grown." He left without another word. I watched him walk down the street, coffee still warm in my hand, and I felt it, that quiet, aching peace, the kind that only comes when you've finally made it home, not to a place, not to a person, but to yourself. They say the hardest lessons come wrapped in the softest beginnings. He didn't walk into my life like a storm. He walked in quietly, like sunlight through curtains on a sleepy morning. And maybe that's why I didn't notice when the warmth faded, because I thought it was still there, just behind a cloud. Looking back, I don't hate him. In fact, some part of me still hopes he's okay, still hopes he's healing, because what we had, it did matter, even if it didn't last. But now, I see it for what it was. A mirror. He reflected all the parts of me I didn't yet understand, the parts that longed to be seen, the parts that believed love had to be earned. He taught me patience, but not the good kind, the kind that waits and waits until it forgets what it's waiting for. He taught me how easily I could vanish, how quickly I'd trade my voice for the comfort of being wanted. He taught me that not all I love yous mean the same thing, that sometimes and people say it because they want to feel loved, not because they know how to give it. But he also taught me strength, because when I finally left, I didn't just walk away from him. I walked away from every version of myself that believed love meant staying, no matter what. He taught me clarity, how to listen to the silence between words, how to trust the knot in my stomach instead of silencing it. He taught me boundaries, not by honoring them, but by crossing them again and again, until I finally said, enough. Some lessons hurt more than others. Some leave scars, but scars are just proof that healing happened, that I survived, and in many ways, I did more than survive. I became now. I drink my coffee slowly. I answer texts when I want to, not out of obligation. I say what I mean. I ask for what I need. And most importantly, I don't chase love anymore, because real love doesn't need chasing. It meets you where you are. It stands beside you in your wholeness. It doesn't ask you to disappear to be worthy. So yes, he taught me many things, some painful, some powerful, but the most important thing he ever taught me was how to choose myself. And for that, I'm grateful. The hardest part wasn't leaving him. It was learning how to live without the version of myself who needed him. In the first few weeks, I woke up every day expecting to hear his voice, to smell his cologne, to move around someone else's routine. But all I heard was silence. All I felt was space. And slowly, that silence stopped being emptiness. It became possibility. I started small, morning walks. Not for fitness, just for sunlight. Breakfast at my own pace. eggs the way I liked them. Not scrambled because he hated runny yolks. Music that didn't need to be shared. I painted the walls a soft terracotta. Bought a new duvet cover, mustard yellow, warm and bright. I lit candles for no reason at all. I created rituals. Sunday laundry with jazz music. Wednesday night journaling. Friday takeout from the Thai place he never liked. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I made new friends. Not out of rebellion, but because connection called to me in a different way now. I wasn't trying to fill a void. I just wanted to witness and be witnessed. One of them, Maya, was the first to tell me, "You laugh with your whole face now." I didn't know what she meant until I saw it in the mirror. I started therapy, too. Not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand the blueprint I'd been handed, to learn which pieces I wanted to keep and which ones I needed to rewrite. My therapist asked me once, "What do you want your life to feel like? Not just look like?" I answered without hesitation, free. Freedom looked different than I thought it would. It wasn't grand or loud. It was dancing barefoot in my kitchen while dinner simmered. It was saying no without guilt. It was leaving texts unread when I needed silence. It was feeling joy without permission. I traveled, too, just for a weekend. A solo trip to the mountains. I hiked a trail alone. Stood at the summit, wind biting at my cheeks, and I cried, not from sadness, but from the staggering realization that I had made it. Through heartbreak, through grief, through the terrifying process of becoming. One afternoon, I found a letter I'd written to myself the day I left him, folded and tucked away in the back of a drawer. It read, "If you ever forget why you chose yourself, remember how it felt to be unloved in the middle of a relationship. Remember how quiet the house was, how heavy your heart. Remember that you are not hard to love. You just outgrew the space you were shrinking to fit." I folded it back with a smile. I didn't need it anymore, but I was grateful it existed. My life now isn't perfect. I still have lonely nights, still doubt myself, still miss the idea of what could have been. But I don't miss him, and more importantly, I don't miss who I had to become to keep him. Now, when someone asks me if I'm seeing anyone, I smile, and sometimes I say, "Yes, me. I'm finally seeing me." And that's a love story worth telling. Closure used to be my obsession. I thought, if I could just get the right explanation, the perfect apology, the missing puzzle piece, then maybe I could rest. Maybe I could move on. I replayed conversations in my head, imagining how they could have gone differently. I drafted texts I'd never send. I even wrote letters to him I knew he'd never read. I kept thinking closure was something he had to give me. But the truth is, closure isn't given. It's chosen. I used to believe I needed him to say I'm sorry, not just for the betrayal, but for every small moment he made me feel invisible. I wanted him to recognize the weight I carried, the nights I cried myself to sleep, while he played video games in the other room, the way I shrank myself just to keep us afloat. But one day, I realized something. Even if he did say all the right things, it wouldn't undo the past. And it wouldn't change the fact that I stayed longer than I should have. I didn't need him to say sorry. I needed to forgive myself. forgive myself for not leaving sooner, for the nights I begged the universe to fix what was already broken, for all the ways I abandoned myself to avoid being abandoned by him. Forgiveness, it turns out, isn't soft. It's fierce. It's choosing peace over punishment, not for them, but for you. Closure came slowly, in the way I stopped checking his social media, in the way I stopped measuring new love by the old wound, in the way I could hear his name without flinching. It came when I realized that not every love story gets a neat ending. Sometimes the story just ends mid-sentence, no punctuation, and that's okay. I don't need a final conversation. I don't need him to see how much I've grown. I don't even need him to regret losing me, because the version of me who needed those things, she's gone. And the woman who stands here now, she's whole, not because of closure, but because she stopped needing it. Maybe one day, he'll look back and remember me. Maybe he won't, but that's no longer my business, because I've built a life where his memory is just that. A memory, not a ghost I keep feeding, not a wound I keep reopening, just a chapter I've already closed. And finally, I'm writing a new one. I don't know who you are yet. Maybe we've already met in passing. Maybe we're years away from crossing paths. Or maybe you're already in my life, quietly waiting until I'm ready to notice you. But when you do come, I want you to know a few things. I will not love you with desperation. I've learned the difference between clinging and choosing, between needing and wanting. I will not ask you to fix me. I've done the work to heal. I've stitched myself together, not perfectly, but beautifully. So I won't come to you as a half. I'll come to you whole. And I'll ask the same of you. I need you to know that I will love softly, but not passively. I will speak when something hurts. I will not pretend I'm okay just to keep peace. I will not make myself small so you can shine brighter. I want partnership, not pedestal. I want truth, not performance. I want real, messy, honest, human. There will be moments when I flinch, not because of you, but because of what came before. Be patient with that. I'm still learning that love doesn't have to hurt to be real. But don't try to rescue me from my past. Just hold space for who I am now, and I promise I'll do the same for you. If you're the right person, you'll understand that I need freedom to feel safe. I need room to grow, even if it means growing in different directions sometimes. I need silence. Sometimes, not because I'm shutting you out, but because I'm finding my way back in. I will love you in a way that doesn't take from you. I will love you with eyes wide open. I will love you with both feet planted, not one foot out the door. I won't compete with your past, and I won't ask you to compete with mine. What we build together will be its own story, not a sequel, not a rewrite, something new, something sacred. I know now that love isn't fireworks every day. It's showing up. It's choosing each other on the boring Tuesdays. It's doing the dishes when the others had a hard day. It's the quiet grace of staying. If you're the one who gets to love me next, I want you to know I've saved the best of me for you, not because I waited, but because I became her. So whenever you come as you are. No armor, no act, Just bring your whole self, and I'll meet you there, with a heart that's ready, with arms that no longer ache, with love that's already home.